You're listening to On the Couch with Dr. Michelle, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Hey, thank you for being on the couch today with me, Dr. Michelle Cohen, and we're going to be talking about fear and anxiety, stress, trauma, and how to manage all those things, especially in our lives today with everything that's going on in the world. I mean, we all are getting that feeling of being overwhelmed. As a matter of fact, in the literature, it says about a third of the world's population suffers from anxiety disorders of all kinds. And half of Americans have had some kind of trauma in their life, whether it be something from a traumatic childhood, assault, shooting, natural disasters, surviving anything. Can you imagine that? I mean, we all have flashbacks or, as we call them, snapshots of memories that have been very traumatic, and they stay with us. So we're going to be talking about taking care of all of those things, managing the stress, managing the fears, and managing the anxiety and what it's all about. You know, fear is one of the most deeply rooted biological mechanisms that have been with us. That is the humankind brain way before Homo sapiens sapien, probably. And, fear was meant to be our closest friend, as you probably know, but it's also our worst enemy, especially right now as we see it all over the world happening. So let's welcome my special guest today. Let's have him join me while he's virtually on the other part of the country. Hello, Dr. Arash Javanbakht. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me on, Michelle.
You have written one of the best books I have read on managing anxiety, managing fears, understanding what they are, and also explaining some of the personal situations and patients who you've been involved with. Amazing stuff. By the way, viewers, listeners, his book is called Afraid, Understanding the Purpose of Fear and Harnessing the Power of Anxiety. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the feedback.
You're going to get a lot of feedback today. I put it out on social media, and I want to thank everybody who's listening and watching on LA Talk Radio and also on our Facebook page right here. Well, let's talk about it. I'd like to first of all share your bio. I mean, the issue is it would take up about half an hour of the show if I did that. So let me get as brief as I can about who you are and what you've done so everybody can really understand the world expert that you are and how much you've been involved with helping people with anxiety and fear and primarily trauma. He's a psychiatrist and serves as the director of Stress, Trauma, and Anxiety Research Clinic, also known as START. He's nationally known for his clinical research work on anxiety, trauma, PTSD, and heavily involved in the treatment of civilians, refugees, and first responders, also with PTSD. Thank you for so much work that you do with people who desperately need it. By the way, Doctor's work has been featured on CNN, National Geographic, Al Jazeera, NPR, Scientific American, Washington Post, American Psychiatric Association, Anxiety and Depression Association of America, and tens of other media outlets. As I said, I can go on and on. But with all that information, let's take a look at your book and talk about anxiety and fear and where it comes from and how to help people, which you are doing so amazingly well. So, as I always ask all of my guests, why did you decide to finally write this book?
Very good question. First, I want to show the book here. So
yeah, let's do it.
We will see it on when they want to, those who choose to get it.
There it is.
So as you said, my specialty is fear, from anything from the genetics, epigenetics, inflammation, brain, body, brain imaging, to treatment and advancing our treatment methods. Actually, we are one of the only groups in the world who is basically using advanced mixed reality, augmented reality technologies for treatment of
I love that.
And PTSD.
Yeah.
And another role, and I'm also heavily involved in clinical work. I treat people. I work in my clinic with all these different populations that you mentioned, mostly trauma exposed refugees, first responders, survivors of torture, human trafficking.
Mm.
And I also, on a side, have been engaged in public education via media,
Oh, that's wonderful.
talking to the public about what matters about these issues. Because, and I saw that as a mission, because I see there is a lot of misinformation and wrong information out there.
Yeah.
A lot of because this is, as you said, this is anxiety and fear are very common, and this can be a large business, right? So a lot of
Yeah,
people out there are making money,
sure.
we're not offering much help. So
Right.
at some point, and when I write something for the media, I see like, okay, my research paper, we work 5 years of research and scientific work and publish, and 200 people read this paper. But when you do a public education
Right.
on the media, which is basically what you're
Yeah,
doing,
sure.
millions of people can be exposed.
Yeah.
So I
Yes.
saw this as a strong opportunity.
Yes.
And at some point, I said, okay, how about I write what I tell? And I'm always teaching my patients, right?
Right.
Impact of exercise. How can you use your anxiety? What are the
Yes.
things you can do? What are the treatments? Let me write it. So basically, I thought, and I looked out and I saw there aren't many
Yeah.
books
Yeah.
which are written by experts, number one.
Right.
Number two, have a widespread, basically a comprehensive approach to fear and anxiety in an understandable way to the public.
Yes.
The other thing that bothered me was that you pick up a book and I read, and you have read 3 chapters of the book, and you
Right.
just know about the author and their dog and where they did their training. A lot of tangentiality in the books.
Yeah.
Basically, I thought I want to write something with the respect to the time of the audience and the readers. I'm not going to go on tangents. I'm not going to go on too much details of scientific jargon or my own life stories, but
Right. Right.
do something which is science-based but also understandable. So I talk about research that we do in our laboratory and others, but I also talk about my work with my patients. I talk about examples from my personal life.
Yes.
Basically, and the comprehensive overview of fear, from evolution, brain, body, what does too much fear and anxiety do to the brain and the body, why we love to be scared and enjoy the
Right.
Halloween, how
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
yeah, all these different aspects
Right.
to go down to
Yeah.
treatments and how to seek treatment and politics and media. So I just said, okay, this year we're going to do this, sat down. The mistake I made was that I didn't take a sabbatical. So my nightly things were this. I kept writing, and I was actually 2 weeks close to my deadline when I said, okay, I'm going to just go away. So I went to Tucson, to this
Yes.
beautiful old resort next to the mountains.
Yes. Isn't
And
it?
it's amazing. It's just like
Yes.
very inspiring. And I
Yes.
wrapped up the book there in the next to the mountains, which was a great pleasure.
Sure. Exactly. No, beautifully said. There really is something to getting out there in peaceful environments where we can just calm the mind. And you know about calming the mind. You're a world-renowned expert on that. So there is something about receiving information and being able to just uh, gather the best way of writing we can just from being out in beautiful scenery and energy that's not a lot of people.
And the change
Right.
of context, because
Right.
my brain is in a different context, which is not associated with my day-to-day challenges and problems
Yeah,
and stressors. So it's just like you can seclude yourself from.
right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I do in a little bit want to get into why we love being scared, but then on the other hand, we're horrified by things that happen to us in life and have happened to us. So what's the difference between fear and anxiety?
Yeah, and this is an important question, because we use these words interchangeably all the time, but from a technical standpoint, they have some difference. So fear is when I'm afraid of something.
Uh-huh.
Means that there's a clear object or situation that I'm afraid of. I know what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of a dog. I'm afraid of a gun being pointed at me. I'm afraid of being in the elevator.
Right.
So I know what I'm afraid of, and it's
Right.
situational.
Uh-huh.
So I am there. I have an object or target or situation or context I'm afraid of. But when it comes to the anxiety, it's more of a kind of an apprehension feeling of worrying about something bad happening.
Right. Yeah.
Example I always use is that if someone is pointing a gun at me, what I'm experiencing is fear.
Right.
But if they tell me there is someone with the gun in this neighborhood, that's anxiety, because I'm on alert all the time. I'm constantly looking for something, but it is not clear what it is. And that constant state of apprehension and being on alert is anxiety. And of course, a lot of times anxiety has more of internal part.
Sure.
Talk about anxieties and worries that we have
Yeah.
about things that have not happened yet and are not here.
Right. Yeah. Generalized anxiety, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Constantly ruminating about the possibilities of what if, or living in the past, what I should have said or should have done, and of course beating ourselves up for not doing so. I love the way you write, and in your book Afraid, you suggest that there's a problem with humans.
Just one.
Just a little, just one. And to quote you, you say, it's as if there's still an ape sitting inside of us all the time. I love that because, we do come from that species, don't we? So,
Yeah, absolutely. So, especially when it comes to fear, because this is a system that has evolved through different species over millions of years to get to here, and it is so primitive that still my colleagues right here at the university look at brains of rats and mice to understand
yeah.
how the brains of humans when it comes to fear circuitry. And
Yeah.
this is a basically mechanism. I always say to understand fear, we have to understand the context within which it evolved.
Right.
It was the context of, let's say, 50, just anytime you want to understand the ape inside of you, look at 50,000 years ago. If, let's say, 50,000 years ago, I was going to give a talk to a group of humans, like right now, I want to give a talk and I'm nervous and my heart's pounding and my breathing is short. And I was like, why? What's wrong with me?
Right.
This mechanism, this job is to protect me, is going against me, right? But in reality, this system evolved to help us survive in those situations.
Sure.
Meaning that if I'm talking to a group of humans and they don't like me, in a matter of minutes, one of us could be dead. So I had to have the heart pounding and prepare me for fight, flight, because these are the responses that this system evolved to do. But so this is the hardware, and hardware evolves very slowly. We are talking about thousands of years, millions of years. But the software, even over the past 1,000 years, has an environment, the context has evolved tremendously. So the situations that we see as challenging today are extremely different than situations of challenge in the past. But the brain reacts the same way. Then other metaphor I use is that when I am dreaming, someone else is in charge and I'm just watching what's going on, right? And I'm reacting to it. When I'm awake, that dreaming part is now dreaming, that other me, and that is reacting to whatever is happening in the civilized world that doesn't understand, but I feel the emotions, I feel the fear, I feel the anxiety, I feel the terror, and most of the times these reactions don't make sense in us.
It's so true. A lot of times our dreams don't make sense. However, if you have some training and understanding that, we can work through some of those dreams. And I don't know necessarily if they are, as Freud said, wish fulfillments. I don't know if I buy into that. But I do buy into the fact that in that REM stage, supposedly we're trying to figure out things. We're calculating. We're trying to get our brains back to cellular balance again to perhaps function for the next day. Is that sort of true, perhaps?
So people have different theories, right? Some theories is that basically what is happening during dreaming is that what has gone through the day is being encoded and made sense of in relation to what has happened in the past. Basically, what I had in memories and these new memories are being added. But from a psychology standpoint, we look at dreams as basically as the language of the unconscious, subconscious, automatic brain, depending on what realm you come from, you have different language.
Yes.
And that is basically part is the vicious, part is the fierce, part is how I'm processing. So that ape, what's that ape or not, or maybe like the caveman, cavewoman is in this world. And a lot of times, like in that sense, in the awake time, we can make sense of those. Okay, these are the reactions I'm having to my life, and that is what the automatic brain is thinking and perceiving of the world.
Ah, beautifully said, Doctor. By the way, in case you just joined us here, live radio, also on the podcast, I'm speaking with one of the world's specialists. To me, you are.
I appreciate it.
And you are, to that matter, on managing fear anxiety, stress, how to take care of it, how to understand it in the brain and understand ourselves, and how we can cure some of those illnesses we have. Dr. Arash Javanbak, and he's not only a psychiatrist, of course, medical doctor, but again, he's a world leader in helping us understand. And we're talking about his latest book, Afraid: Understanding the Purpose of Fear and Harnessing the Power of Anxiety. So, what are some of the factors that determine the intensity of our anxiety and fear? You talk about those, and we really don't think about that a lot. We just get scared, right?
Yeah, very true. And there's so many variables. As I was
Yeah.
book, I was thinking, I was like, oh, this part and
Ooh.
this part and this
Yeah,
part.
yeah, yeah.
So the most basic part is the biology, right? Some of
Mm.
us are more and some of us are less reactive to
Mhm.
what we perceive as danger. And I say we perceive as threat because my
Right.
perception is not always the truth. So and the way we react might be different. Some people are more chill and relaxed, and some people
Yeah.
are more
Yeah.
anxiety. And each could have had an evolutionary purpose, and each could have
Sure.
had an evolutionary basically cause. Means that your epigenetic, if my parents and ancestors had more exposure to danger and trauma,
Oh,
some
yeah.
genetic expression changes have led to me being more anxious. And we see that in, let's say, Holocaust children and grandchildren of
Yes.
Holocaust survivors or refugees. The other
Yes.
part is what I've learned, especially in the context of the modern life. Let's say if a rock is falling on our head or if a bear is attacking us, we all will have the same fear. None of us will just sit there and just be relaxed.
Right?
It's because that's a very concrete fear. But how scary is failing an exam or scoring low on an evaluation?
Mm.
In that context, that fear animal secretary doesn't even understand it. So we
Right.
basically learn from our
Right.
environment. Let's say when I was a kid, every time I had an exam, my mom looked terrified. So
Right.
I have registered that
Right.
failing an assessment
Yes.
bad.
Yeah.
Some other person might not see it the same way. So we both have it's the same exam. We may
Right.
even know both the same amount, but each of us is different level angry.
Right. Yeah.
Then there are other factors like how much knowledge I have the danger. If I see a snake, I may freak out. A zoologist sees the snake and says, "Oh, this is a safe snake. I'm not."
Right. Right.
The knowledge. The other part
Yes.
is the skills we have.
Right.
Let's say someone draws a knife on me. I'm terrified. A Navy
Oh, yeah.
SEAL next to me is not terrified because they
Yeah.
have skills of how to control this situation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Combination of all these variables together that basically helps us determine how dangerous something is and how scared we should be of.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes people who look less, and we talk about it in the chapter on bravery, right? How
Right.
brave action.
Yeah.
Sometimes me
Mhm.
not being scared is because I miscalculated. It's because
Ah.
I didn't perceive that threat enough. Because we talk about
Mm.
fear in modern life, we talk about fear and anxiety as a bother, as a challenge, as something which is wrong, or most of the time.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
reality, a lot of times, fear or anxiety, they are the pin in the chair, in the wrong chair we are sitting on, which says you gotta move away or you gotta fix something. So, fear and anxiety, they are signal
Yes.
which should be paid attention to,
Oh, yeah.
and then cognitively appraised. And then sometimes this is telling you there's something really wrong that you should avoid, you should run away, you should, because if we didn't have fear response, we would go extinct.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Yes.
and then when we see how much it is reliable and how much it is not reliable, and then based on that we work. And actually, anxiety can also help our functioning, which we can talk about later about like
Yeah. Yeah.
stage of anxiety and fear.
No, sure, exactly. That's beautifully explained, the difference between innate fear and, of course, learned fear that we have. And it is in our DNA. It absolutely is for survival, depending on different civilizations and cultures. It's what it
Absolutely.
is. It really is. So, well, you mentioned courage. What, some people who love to watch superheroes, right? Or hear these stories, such as some of the examples you gave in your book about the woman who lifted the car up from someone who, was dying and saved that person's life, or some of these amazing feats that we do. So Are people who are brave or courageous, are they fearful too? Or what would you have to say about that?
That chapter was one of the most challenging chapters for me to write, because this is a very complicated concept which we don't deal much in the clinical work with, right? Because
Right,
most of our
right.
work with the other side of it, the terror and
Uh-huh.
scared. Not people don't come to the doctor and say, "Oh, I'm too brave, fix me." So, and I had to think about it. So
Yeah,
we have a brave act, what is
right.
seen and perceived as brave from outside. But then it comes what happened in the mind of the person who took this action, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
that is very complicated,
It
because
is.
what I perceive as brave might not be really brave in the mind of the person who did it. I will bring back another
Right,
example.
right.
A mom trying to tackle down someone who pulled a gun on their kids
Right.
is different than a Navy SEAL doing that. For a Navy SEAL, it's a piece of cake. For that
Yeah.
mom, it's something extremely dangerous.
Right, right.
And then I use the example of a mom because I say even biologically we change
Mm-hmm,
different times of life. Like there are studies on rats that
Yes, yes.
rats and mice are creatures which usually run away and freeze. That's the reaction to danger.
Yeah, yeah.
When a mom has pups as a rat or a mouse, she attacks. Her biology
Mhm.
changes.
Yes,
She becomes more courageous.
Mhm.
She moves more towards the aggression part of fear and aggression.
yes.
But then there is, as I said earlier, also how much I know about the situation. Do I have the skills to handle it? Let's say if someone is yelling and screaming and shouting in the psych ER,
Yeah, yeah.
I may look more brave because I have more skills of de-escalating those situations, right? But someone else who is very new to it, has less experience, may see it less dangerous,
Yes.
more dangerous. And then there's the sense of control we have over it, right?
Right,
How much
right.
control do I feel I have on the situation, which could be wrongly assessed. I may overestimate my sense of control, and I may put myself in harm's way. I think, oh, I did some jujitsu training. I'm gonna go tackle this gunman, and I lose my life over it, right? So that's
Right, right,
not
exactly.
always good to be brave. Sometimes an act of bravery is just a stupid act that happened to succeed. Then there's also the reasons we do it, because we are
Yes,
seekers of meaning. What is the
yes.
meaning of that action? Let's say talk about let's say it's a Ukrainian soldier now. They are doing it for the purpose of, okay, even if I die, I have saved my family, my kids,
Yes.
I don't know, my people, my land,
Yeah.
right? We have created a
Mhm.
meaning. But that
Right.
meaning sometimes could also be putting two fears in parallel with each other. What I mean by
Yes.
that is that if I don't do this, my culture will really look down upon me and they will see me as a coward. So I have to go over the
Ah, yes.
right. So
Yes.
between two fears, I've chosen the lesser. The
Mhm.
other things I can think of, but then there's also
Hmm.
lots of situations that I cannot explain. For example, I had
Right,
a police officer.
right.
I work with responders a lot. This woman, her partner was shot in the neck, and she is on the ground, putting with her hand pressing on her partner's jugular, while the gunman is coming towards him.
Oh my gosh.
And I asked her, "Weren't you worried about your own life at that moment?"
Right,
Her answer was, "I was not thinking about it at that moment.
right.
I was just focused on saving my friend's life."
Beautiful. Isn't that, that's one of the biggest conundrums I have about, the reason why we have survival mechanisms. It's to save our lives and fear and how we react. However, in this sense, and in many senses of extreme power or selflessness, we're not thinking about our own survival. And I think that's beautiful. I love those stories.
And
You
that's
know.
that's parts of our humanity
Hmm.
that we haven't explored much in science yet, because
Right.
most of the psychology and psychiatry has been focused on pathology, not on the
Right.
opposite side of it.
Right, exactly. I'm getting some questions here on straighttalkdoc@gmail.com, who's watching our live podcast right now. But I first want to ask you a few other things that I think are pretty intriguing. And one of them is, and you covered this briefly earlier, why do we really enjoy being scared? I mean, I can't watch horror movies anymore. When I was younger, I thought they were real fun,
Mhm.
and there's this new spooky ride before Halloween out here in Hollywood at the Universal Studios that they're inviting people to go. no way would I go there and expose myself to startle.
Mhm.
Why do we love that? Why
That's
do we join?
that was actually one of the fun parts of the book when I was writing.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
why? I mean, we go to psychologists or psychiatrists and pay them to help us not be afraid, but then we also go to the amusement park or to the haunted house and pay them to scare us.
Yeah.
Right? Or
Right.
horror movies. Why do we do that?
Right.
I
Right.
think there are several aspects here. One aspect is that so there's a lot of overlap between the neurobiology of thrill and thrill seeking and fear. Basically, the sympathetic nervous system, all of those are the excitement and the fear. A lot of even bodily reactions are similar. And I think what happens here is that, let's say you show a dog barking to your dog on TV versus an angry dog in real world. Your dog may
Right. Right.
of them equally. Your dog is terrified of the dog on
Sure.
TV also.
Sure.
That dog is inside of me also. So I show them the scary thing,
Hmm.
the animal, and then I enjoy the ride because I have a sense of control. I know we are safe. So we
Right.
create that excitement, and then we enjoy the excitement in a controlled
Right.
environment. Because,
Yeah.
but you know I have control. When you're watching a horror movie, you want to make
Right.
sure the remote is next to you, right? Because you have the control to stop the closet when you
Right.
want to do it.
Right.
You want to make sure even if the lights are off, you can turn them on if you need.
Sure. Exactly.
And one thing that comes here is the context. We have a contextual brain, and that contextual brain has the ability to tell me if the lion I'm seeing is in African Saharas or is in the zoo. And that determines, because my amygdala, the fear brain, reacts the same to both of them. I see
Yes.
the lion, says run away. Then the rest of the brain comes in and says, oh, we are in the zoo. Look, it says zoo here. There are bars between us. There are kids having
Right.
in here.
Right.
So I don't get scared. So that's part of it. And also having a sense of control. Then there is how real and how unreal it feels to us. So you said you get very scared of them.
Yeah.
I think part is that you have a better imagination or being able to see them as real. So
Yes.
and you
Yes.
don't get so I remember I was watching a zombie movie with a friend, and
Right.
I was like, well, these zombies are, well, there's no heart pumping, there's no oxygen and glucose going to the muscles. How are these muscles working?
Right.
He says, Arash, if you want to enjoy the movie, you gotta
Right.
shut down your logical brain. So we
Right.
shut down our logical brain to some extent. But then the extent that it becomes realistic to us,
Right.
let's say you go
Right.
to the haunted house and you
Right.
are sure by rules they are not allowed to touch you,
Right.
versus you don't know if they're going to touch you or not.
Yeah.
All of fear could be different, right?
Right.
With the horror movies, I don't know. If I watch a zombie movie, I'm not be as scared. But when I was terrified when I saw Hereditary or I saw Exorcist when I was a teenager,
Oh my gosh.
that
Yes.
felt more realistic and plausible. It can happen.
Oh,
in your
yeah.
bedroom. Zombies are not in your bedroom.
That's
So,
right. No, that's right.
and then I think there's also a mindfulness aspect to it. And we can talk
Yes.
about mindfulness because I really want to mention that. But the mindfulness aspect is that you totally dissociate when you are there.
Right.
You are not at your work and your challenges you have and the bills you have to pay and the problem you had with your boss and the exam you have a week from now. It's a moment, an hour and a half of mindfulness away from these things that help us recharge,
Ah, okay.
dissociate from normal life.
Right.
That I've learned through my work, these kind of mindful activities, the activities that disconnect us from what's going on in the normal life, help a lot in recharging. And there are different ways
Oh,
we can
yeah.
do that. And then
Sure.
there's the aspect of, I think, practice.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
aspect of practice is that, like, I have two puppy Great Pyrenees, and they constantly
Aw.
are wrestling with each other.
Right.
Why?
Cute.
And they're practicing for the future. They're practicing hunting. They're practicing fighting with wolves. So when we do these thrilling activities, let's say I'm watching a horror movie. What I do? At least this is what I always do. I'm constantly thinking, what should the actor do to save themselves?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
sometimes you even yell at them. Why didn't you go this way? Why did you go that way?
Right. Right.
So I'm practicing. So
Right.
basically we are practicing how
Right.
we would deal with these situations. And I think that's something very primitive.
Yes, it
inherent in us,
makes.
because, yeah, we want to learn how to deal with these challenging conditions.
Boy, does that make sense? And talking about the author just brought up something else to me. Um, Shakespeare and his plays, of course, his books. I mean, he was a genius because although they had the hero, the brave, courageous, strong hero, there was always a fatal flaw. And I think that's another situation where we are relating to that particular hero or brave, courageous person we're seeing on the screen do everything, but there's just something within them that is human like. They still have emotions and they have little, triggers that they react to. So it makes it more human to us and safer to watch as well. So,
And I think that's why Batman is cooler to me than Superman.
do you know, I hear this from so many people, men particularly. I always ask them, who do you prefer, Superman or Batman? They say Batman, because he doesn't have superpowers. He just gears himself up and psychs himself up for being a super guy.
You can connect with that character.
You
right?
can connect with that guy, exactly. And I love that. I think that's just fascinating stuff. So, by the way, if you just joined us here, we're talking about an incredible book, and we are Dr. Arash Javanbakht. He's written the book Afraid, Understanding the Purpose of Fear and Harnessing the Power of Anxiety. He's one of the world's experts on that. Of course, being a psychiatrist, medical doctor, he specializes in working with people who have suffered from trauma, severe anxiety disorders, and amazing treatments for them. And of course, medications, we can touch briefly on that, the SSRIs and, other benzodiazepines, I guess, but the SSRIs are the number one medication really right now that doctors prescribe for anxiety, unless there's some psychosis involved. It would be an antipsychotic perhaps, but they help. I think a lot of people have, fears like, I don't want to have a medication because it's adding more chemicals. It's not really doing that, is it?
I appreciate this opportunity to basically
Mhm.
put some education for the public. I am not a pill pusher, and I have a strong base in psychology, all different types of psychotherapy, and I use it in my clinic. And almost all
Beautiful.
my patients are in therapy also. So, because with therapy, you gain skills that you can keep to deal with the situation for a long time. But what medications does is that, as you said, medications do not add chemicals to the brain. Most of, especially when it comes to the antidepressant, anti-anxiety, SSRI medications, they basically help the brain use more efficiently what it has.
Mm-hmm.
I always say they are not addictive when we are talking about
Right.
addiction.
Sure.
Benzodiazepines, that's a separate story.
Yeah.
But the, SSRIs that we are talking about, or SNRIs, these are
Mhm.
not zombifying people if they're done at the right dose and right medication. They are not going to change the way you think. All they do is that they reduce that intense level of anxiety to the level I can be more functional and use my logical brain more efficiently. And I think there's also a part of a historical aspect, maybe also through the history of exposure, media, psychiatry, that
Right.
anytime, I mean, I see it in day-to-day basis. I'm an outpatient psychiatrist. I basically write a prescription, and the patient goes to the pharmacy, picks up the pill, and they still feel it's being forced upon them. And
Yes.
I remind them, you are the one who goes to the pharmacy, you are the one who picks it, and you are the one who puts it in yourself, and you are the one who tomorrow can say, I don't want to do it. So in reality, people are in control.
Yeah.
And we have so many medications that we don't need for someone to suffer the side effects.
Yes.
Always find a medication that works but doesn't have side effects, because it's stupid for me to give someone reduce some problem but add another problem to this.
Right.
And in combination with therapy, I find them very effective. And of course, as you said, for some people, you can see that clearly the problem is out in the psychosocial, and psychotherapy alone is enough. You don't have to do it. I say just go to the therapy. We don't need medications. And then for some people, it's a lot more biological.
Sure.
Special medication is more prominent, and
many times it is. Yes.
Both does the best. And people don't have to be on medications for the rest of their life.
Right, exactly. And anti-anxiety medication also was originally formulated to manage depression, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm glad that you brought this up, because sometimes people get confused. Why are you giving me an antidepressant for
right.
anxiety? Well, the reality is that the same medications we use for depression, we also use for anxiety.
Exactly. The serotonin, norepinephrine,
Yeah.
dopamine, whatever's that chemical is encouraging our brains to push along, so there's no reuptake.
And the reality, still, to be honest, we don't know for sure and how they work. But what we know is that they work.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. As evidenced by all of your patients who say, "Hey, those clouds," and this is what I hear quite often when prescribed an SSRI or something, is those dark clouds are just lifted a little bit. I just feel a little light. I can't describe it, but it's not like you wake up and you're happy, but it's just sort of slowly elevating the negative fears and thoughts and depression as well.
I always
Whereas,
say it's a shield that you wear against the stress. Stress is all still there. You have to learn how
sure.
to fight the stress, but it's a shield at least for some time until you overcome the stress or you gain the skills that you need.
Do you think some people will have to take antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication for the rest of their life? Or are they able to, in some way, be free of those medications and manage their fears and or depression?
So I have a very pragmatic approach,
Hmm.
meaning that the only reason myself and my patient are together is to help them feel better.
Hmm.
Anything else happening here, we have wasted our time and their money.
Hmm.
That's what I tell everybody.
Beautiful,
So,
boy.
so from that approach, so for some people, they can stop the medication. Some people can reduce the medication. For some people, especially
Mhm.
those with chronic trauma,
Yes.
for the differences in biology, for
Hmm.
very intense stressors ongoing, because there are some stresses that we cannot really
Sure.
remove, right?
Hmm.
Poverty. Unfortunately, this is
Mm.
something out of my hand to manage or handle.
No, yeah.
So for some people, they'll use maybe longer. But here's the thing that I say: there was a time that people didn't know anything about how to help with mental illness, right? There were times
Right.
that people were, I don't know, all these medieval approaches to mental illness and nothing would work. If all that takes for me to be more functional and less stress is to put a pill in my mouth every day, even,
Hmm.
sign me up if I have no other option.
Right.
Because at the
Right.
end of the day, and I always say, I don't treat anxiety, I treat dysfunction and distress.
Yes.
Those are the
Yes.
major goals. If someone's functioning is so impaired, they cannot achieve their full potentials.
Hmm. Hmm.
If a medication is the answer, let it be.
No, exactly. No, really beautifully said. So you just answered my next questions. The differences between abnormal fear and anxiety and normal fear and anxiety, right?
Absolutely.
When we can't function per se anymore, carry out our daily activities, social, educational, working in particular places, family dysfunctions, where you can't, in other words, function on the scale of global assessment of functioning 0 to 100. When you're just falling down and not functioning in most aspects of your life, right?
Yeah, and I always tell my students, we don't want a robot. We don't want to eradicate people's function.
Right.
Let's say I may have depression, but I lose my dad and I'm sad. It doesn't mean that I have a relapse of depression. It means
Oh,
I'm a human.
sure.
I've had, like, if I'm in a physically abusive relationship and I feel terrified,
Mm,
that's a normal
sure.
human being scared of a danger. I don't want to numb the person's emotions.
Right.
As you
Right.
said,
Mm,
it's when this anxiety causes dysfunction or
right.
the person functions under significant distress. That's
Right.
this is unwanted, and that's when we
Right.
want to get rid of it. But we
Sure.
also want to make sure there's no real danger. If there's,
Sure.
I don't know, if there's a wolf trying to eat my leg and I want to take a painkiller, that's not the right action. I have to remove my leg out of the wolf's mouth.
Yeah. Really well said. So let's get into some of the clinical diagnoses for anxiety. Some of the most common ones we hear about: generalized anxiety. Of course, we have panic attacks, We have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which, by the way, fascinating that it was taken out of the newest diagnostic statistical manual of mental disorders. That's interesting to me because I guess why was that?
I think the reason they did that, I mean, you're absolutely right. I still, like today, I was teaching residents anxiety disorders, and I talked about OCD and PTSD.
Yeah.
Removed, right? I think they basically did it mostly based on the differences in the neurobiology, because like we know basal ganglia, some different
Right.
brain are involved in OCD, which are not in other anxiety disorders. But you're absolutely right. Still, these are stressing, anxiety provoking conditions.
Right. Okay. That's exactly what they are.
Yeah.
So, and also one of your specialties, of course, post-traumatic stress disorder. So, I'd like to just touch a little bit on maybe each and some of the treatments that you might recommend and that you utilize,
Mhm.
let's say with generalized anxiety disorder.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
So-
that is, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead to finish your quote.
No, that is, and I'm not quoting the exact definition, but it's constant ruminations and inability to function due to fears about the
Yeah.
future, about the past, about anticipatory
Yeah.
fear. Mhm.
And I apologize. I went to text my colleague to bring the headset that I could show you.
Oh, yeah.
Lost your question. So you wanted me to
No,
talk
no.
about the treatments or about the disease?
I thought we could just basically touch on generalized anxiety
okay.
disorder. Yep. And then maybe how to help people with that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So generalized anxiety disorder, I think, is like the distinction it has. Let's say we have phobias, right? I'm afraid
Right.
of snakes,
Mhm.
spiders. So I have a specific thing that I'm afraid of. Or if I've been trauma exposed, what I'm afraid of is the source of trauma or anything that reminds me of the trauma. But the GAD brain is basically a brain which is constantly looking for something to worry about. You take one
Right.
worry from it, you will find another thing to worry about. And the worries are general, as they say, generalized. I worry about the meeting I have after this. I worry about my partner and if they are safe out there. I worry about disease. I worry if someone had a car accident. I worry if I lose my house. And I worry about the worst of possible things. I may be the most successful person in my career.
Right.
I'm worried about, if I lose my job and everything, can I go to this shelter or that shelter to be there, right? So this brain just is on extreme levels of worrying about things, and it is nonstop. And even like if I have GAD right now, I'm talking to you, 50, 60, 70% of my mind is elsewhere, worrying about, all these other things. So I'm in the past, I'm in the future. I cannot be here. And I think something which is amazing about GAD is that it's as if your audience, if any of them have worries, they can probably relate to this.
Yeah.
It's as if the act of worrying is doing something. Let's say a practice. I tell you, okay, you worry all the time. You're worrying like 24/7. For 1 hour, please don't worry. And then come back to your worries.
Right.
I feel like if I stop for 1 hour, I'm increasing the chance of things happening. It's a kind of a magical thing in the back of my mind. If I stop worrying, that will happen.
Right.
So, and that's one of the parts of treatment that we are doing about exposure therapy, exposure to worries. Now you didn't worry and nothing horrible happened. And of course, this kind of constant worrying takes away my attention, takes away my energy.
Yes.
Constantly exposing my brain and body to stress hormones and sympathetic nervous system, causes heart problems, high blood pressure. It's not just in the mind and brain. Now we don't have the brain-body duality anymore. It's just all one system.
Right.
And of course, I cannot concentrate. I cannot focus. I'm always restless. I have headache and all these other symptoms that come with it.
Yes. No, beautifully said. You talked about exposure, a little bit to a massive amount of worry. I was listening to a story the other day about older patient of mine who back in the day was exposed to flooding. Which to me, I have never been a fan of flooding. So that's super major to me, fearful exposure to the feared situation or object, which is usually used with someone who has the diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorders, phobias, social, whatever that would be. And she was telling me these horrible stories about them exposing her directly, flooding her brain to the things that she was afraid of. There were so many, whatever they may be, bacterial, vomiting, hypochondria, all those things. This poor soul was, I mean, she experienced more trauma than anything to me. I mean, if they did little bitty slow exposure, okay, you're safe, you can do that much. Systematic desensitization, let's go a little further now. And I don't know, what do you think about that?
And the thing is that we aren't doing, I don't know many people doing that kind of flooding now.
Right.
Because, I mean, and I've written about like even how brain mechanisms of how psychotherapy works. I think a very important element of psychotherapy is you, the therapist, as a social safety signal anchor in reality. And I always actually, it's interesting. Today I was teaching my residents, and we did talk about exposure therapy, and I said, make sure the first step is something you're sure that is achievable, because you want to prove the fear wrong. You want to prove the fear that, okay, I did this one step, nothing bad happened. Because every time you avoid, basically you're reinforcing the fear. Oh, this is dangerous, avoid it. I'm like, okay, I avoid this, nothing bad happens. So yeah, it is dangerous.
Yeah.
Approach it, nothing bad happens. Next time you avoid it, approach it, nothing bad happens. Gradually you develop that sense of control. But you need to, for the person to gain that sense of control, that's at the end of the day, it's the patient doing it.
Right.
So I always do stepwise, gradually. Now you can, I can do this. Let me go to the next step. Let me go.
Right.
So I don't know how the flooding works, but I'm on your side of being more trusting of gradual exposure.
Yeah, oh, good. I just wanted your feedback on that, and I think it's interesting to the viewers and listeners as well. Let's get into your specialty, which is trauma, working with trauma victims and first responders. What is the best or most effective, do you feel, treatment for PTSD?
So if I did belong to one of those tribes of treatment, I would say my treatment is the best. But I disagree with that. There are different treatments. So what happens in PTSD? And I think it's important for the audience to know what we mean when we talk about trauma. Because especially these days, this word is used for a lot of experiences that are not necessarily traumatic. Are stressful, but not traumatic. But when you come to trauma, we talk about horrible experiences that threaten someone's physical or sexual integrity. We are talking about assault, rape, robbery, shooting, gun violence, domestic abuse and violence, war, natural disasters, serious illness, serious motor vehicle accidents. And then the brain goes to the fight and flight mode and stays there. I'm constantly screening for danger. I'm constantly screening for something bad going on, flashbacks, nightmares, and all these. And it's also important for us to, so let's say COVID, you say I either have COVID or right? But when it comes to trauma, it's not like that. From 0% to 100% of symptoms, at let's say 70%, we draw a line and we say, okay, let's call it PTSD from now on. It doesn't mean a 68 or 65% is not affected. So let's say we call it PTSD now. What is happening here, again, what is the dysfunction? Dysfunction is I'm avoiding a lot of normal life things because of my trauma. I've had people who were trauma exposed and now they're avoiding anything related to basically social people. They avoid anyone who may look like the perpetrator, or they avoid, let's say, sexual violence. They avoid all men. And then there is the constant renewal of memories. So exposure therapy is one of the two major treatments. And traditional approaches focus on exposure to trauma memories. It's hard, it's painful. My focus on exposure is mostly what you're avoiding because of the trauma, not the trauma. And that's we are using this advanced technology where we are basically this technology is I'm gonna go bring actually this headset. It's right here to show you.
I love that. I saw a picture of that in your book. The virtual exposure, which is really a wonderful tool right now. And I've heard a lot about it, and not a lot of psychiatrists are using it actually. But,
I didn't find it here.
Oh, that's okay.
So I will show you. I can talk about it. It's just
Yeah.
goggles you
Yeah.
wear that
Yep.
it's not virtual reality, it's augmented reality, which means
Oh,
it's like you imagine you're wearing a pair of glasses, see-through glasses. You see everything that is around you, and a digital human walks in your room and starts talking to you. So we're using this technology for basically overcoming the consequences of trauma. Let's say I had a police officer. She was a survivor of sexual assault, and she was disabled to the point she was doing grocery shopping online. She was avoiding
Oh.
all kinds of people.
sure.
So she comes in this room, wears the goggles, and it's a real room. She sees me, she sees their surrounding. Two people come and start a conversation in this corner. More people come, more people. So now we throw a party of diverse people of age, sex, race, body type, behavior. Right now, we even have a police station, fire station, grocery store, or a digital cactus you can put in front of the patient, and you will type what they will say, and they will have an automated conversation with the patient.
Oh, that's amazing.
To her graduation ceremony, she was promoted to detective rank. So it works because it's in a very controlled environment. So this is important. Then there's cognitive approaches to it, which is basically, and we don't have to even talk about names.
Right, because we are going to have to wrap this up in a bit. I can't believe it's gone so quickly. But,
and it will be fast. So it's about the cognitions I've created about the experience. Because when bad things happen, we think about why it happened, why me, what has changed about me. The world is different.
Right.
Why did God this to me if I'm a religious person? Am I a bad person? Am I a damaged person? What should I done differently? And one of the important parts of therapy is to remind a person there was a cat who saw the bird and attacked the bird. The bird didn't do anything wrong. It just happened to be there when the cat was hungry. So a lot of times things just don't have a meaning. I was there when the perpetrator was looking for a victim. And that's the only reason. So we change the cognitions. And of course, then there are the medications, right? There's the EMDR method, which is evidence that it works.
Sure.
And for each person, a different one will work better. There's no one that is better. So it has to be chosen. If, as Maslow says, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to resemble a nail.
Well said. Oh, Dr. Arash Javanbakht, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today and for sharing your book. You want to grab that and show that to the viewers? It's called Afraid. Just looking at the word sort of triggers me a little bit. Understanding the purpose of fear and harnessing the power of anxiety.
And if I may have one request, if people like this, I will appreciate a review on Amazon so you can find its way up.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. What's the best way viewers and listeners can find out more about you and get your book?
You can just Google my name, which is Arash Javanbakht. You can see it here, and it's down there. And you can also, for the book, you can look at your bookstore or on Amazon, and you can find it there.
All righty. Thank you so much, Arash, for being such a wonderful guest. I appreciate it. I just would love another 3 hours with you, but you have lots of patients and lots of students. So
I appreciate that. It was a very thought-provoking conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the important work you're doing.
Thanks for all you do and for your time. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Fascinating. Look at it again and understand anxiety and fear and how to manage your own as well. Thanks for joining me here on the couch. I'll be back next week. Have a great week. Bye.
You're listening to On the Couch with Dr. Michelle, right here on LA Talk Radio.